Okay, welcome back, third grade. If you're watching this video, that means that you finished your foreground of our James Rizzi 3D Cityscape, and now you're ready to move on to the middle ground. In our middle ground, we have the buildings that you practice, and now they're the size that we need. Just like with the foreground, when I printed these out, I went ahead and printed behind the buildings a dark gray to let you know that we are going to be cutting that out with scissors before we go ahead and start decorating with colored pencil and paint. You're going to notice on both the right and left side there are two vertical white stripes. We want to make sure that we're leaving those because we're going to need those when we tape this all together. So when we cut, we're just going to be cutting out our gray box above our buildings. So the gray above the buildings is gone because the background we'll be doing later on when you do your sky and you picked either a daytime or a nighttime. And you know you did it right if you left these little white tabs on the right and left. Again, we'll be using those to tape this together before we Sharpie, color, and paint. Go ahead and take a minute to stretch your legs and take your garbage to the recycling bin. The steps are very similar to our foreground. We're going to go ahead and we're going to outline everything with Sharpie, give it a nice, solid, dark outline before adding color with color pencil and our watercolor paint. Just like last time, I love giving the advice because I know some kids, when they're watching these videos, they miss parts and or skip over parts, so I like to put them in all the videos in hopes that they'll catch at least one of the tips that I give for coloring, painting, and this one is going to be for outlining. Most people, when they outline, they'll just do it as if they were drawing, and you'll see them push, which leaves a wavy line, or they'll continue to try to go around it. And the problem with this is it leaves us with rounded edges and a wavy line. So if you want a crisper line, my best advice is to start away from you and then just to pull the line towards your body. Already we have a much thicker, darker, straighter line. I always rotate. I start away from my body and I pull towards me, giving us a nice, crisp, solid corner. I'll turn, I'll repeat, I start away from my body, and then I pull it straight. I'll turn, start away from my body, and I'll pull it straight. Now, they're not perfect because I'm not using a ruler, but they are much straighter than if I was just trying to use my wrist and my arm moving towards and away and from my body, and it gives us much crisper corners. So this is a good tip. Hopefully you can use this to have a nice outline for your buildings. Again, everything's going to get outlined: the eyes, the mouth, any windows that we have and any details will all get outlined in black. Okay, third grade, once you are all done sharpening all your details, then you can go ahead and you can start coloring. Before you grab your colored pencils, there were some kids during the foreground that asked if it was okay to color some things in with the black Sharpie. And I said yes, you know, you can do small, tiny details with the black Sharpie marker. But once the areas start getting really large, like I am going to do the inside of this mouth black and the inside of this mouth black, but I am going to go ahead and use colored pencil because those are bigger areas and I don't want my Sharpie to die because we still have the background to do after our middle ground. So if you're doing small details, definitely okay to use the Sharpie to color in, but if you're doing larger areas, like almost an entire mouth or half of a mouth, you might want to go ahead and skip using a Sharpie and just use a black colored pencil. Before you start drawing on your buildings, again, just some quick tips about coloring for those of you that would like to use them. If you're finding yourself having trouble staying inside of the lines because you're a back and forth colorer, one of the suggestions that I always give kids is go slow around the outside of whatever your shape is and use a slower, controlled hand movement. What this is doing is it's making the outside of my shape much thicker than just the black line. So when I go to color this shape in, it's going to be much harder to go outside of the lines because now I would have to go past the green and the black. So if you're having trouble staying inside of the line, this is a nice little trick to use to help you gain control of your colored pencil or your paintbrush or crayon or marker. So if you have trouble staying inside the lines, this is a nice easy trick to go ahead and maybe slow your hand down a little bit. If you're a back and forth colorer or up and down colorer, again, that's totally fine, but in order for things to look nice and not so much like spaghetti coloring or scribble scrabble, remember if you go up and down, in order to give your shape a more full brighter and nicer color, you can turn your paper and you can go up and down in the opposite direction. This is going to help your color have a more balanced look to it. And the more you repeat this process of turning and going up and down, the nicer the coloring is going to look. This is a crosshatch coloring technique that'll really help improve your coloring as you're doing simple, small steps. So again, right now I'm on the third time going over this square, and every time I do this, it continues to make my color brighter. I don't have to push so hard, so I'm not hurting my hand. And the coloring is looking much nicer than if we were just to go back and forth once or twice. So just a few coloring tips that you can use when you are doing your buildings. When you're ready to start coloring, some things to think about. Your foreground, did you have road? If you did road, you used a lot of black. Most of you did a black road. If you did water, a lot of you have water in front of the buildings. And then you also want to think about your sky. Do you remember, are you doing a day sky? That's going to be blue. Are you doing a night sky? That's going to be black. Those are definitely colors you want to stay away from with your buildings. If you're doing water and a day sky, that's blue in front of the buildings and blue behind the buildings, you might want to try staying away from blue, or at least the blue that you're using for the paint. So if your blue for the water and the sky are a dark blue, maybe using a light blue would be a better choice. Or if your sky and water are a light blue, you might want to think about using a dark blue if you want to use blue on your buildings. Again, if you use black for the road and black for the sky, you're going to want to stay away from dark purples, dark blues, blacks, browns, and dark greens, where everything is going to really start getting dark and hard to see. Plus, any of those colors are going to start blending in with the black Sharpie. So you can use those colors, just be careful. For coloring in our buildings, remember the building itself, we're going to paint that. They're large areas, and it would take a really long time to sit there with a colored pencil and color in the buildings. So the buildings will just be colored in using watercolor paint. What you can color in are the details of the eyes, the windows. Again, if you want something to be white, like the teeth, you're going to go ahead and color those in with white. That's going to help protect your drawing from any watercolor paint that might go over the line. We can wipe it off. For those of you that were watching the video for the foreground, we can color in the blacks of the mouth. And again, we're just going ahead and doing the eyes, windows, mouths, noses, but we'll paint the building. So the coloring shouldn't take a ton of time because a majority of this is going to be done with paint. Just a few tips before you start painting, just like we did in the foreground. Remember, you don't need to wipe any of the water off. And when we get paint, we want to go ahead and spin the brush around in the paint. I don't know, anywhere between 5 and 10 times. If you're just going back and forth, the color is going to be so light, it's going to be hard to see. So you really want to load your brush up. So spinning it, 5 to 10 times is going to give you a good amount of paint when you're painting. When you get water, please make sure that we're not filling it up past the 100 or 4 line on the bottom. You can always get more. When I paint, I have an idea of what colors I'm going to be using for my buildings. My biggest tip for painting is this: start with your lightest color first. If you start with the lightest color first, it'll keep your brush in your water cleaner longer, and it's less trips going to the sink, so you'll actually get done with the project quicker. And if you make a mistake with yellow, orange, or red, you can always cover it up with a darker color. If you go ahead and start painting with blues, greens, and purples and you make a mistake, it's much harder to go back over those with a lighter color. You can definitely not go over your purple with yellow. Not only will it start turning brown on your paper, but it'll also start turning your kits a color that you definitely don't want them, and then you'll have to clean out your kits. So always start with your lightest color first. If you're not sure what colors are lightest, you can look up front on the board. I have them in order. Mostly it goes yellow, orange, red. For this kit, our purple is actually lighter, so then it would go purple, green, blue, brown, and then black. But again, those are in order up on the board, so if you don't remember, you can always look up there. Otherwise, you're going to quickly find out why I had that as a suggestion as you start painting. So the first thing I would ask myself is, do I want any of my buildings yellow? And I do want one of my buildings yellow. I'm actually going to be painting the second one yellow, so I'm going to go ahead and start with yellow and then work my way up towards blue. In order to rinse your brush out, you don't need to get any more water or wash it out at the sinks. You can just massage it on the bottom like you're painting the bottom of the cup for about 10-15 spins, nice and gentle. And again, if you're going from lightest color to the darkest color, the yellow water and the little bit of yellow that's still on your brush is not going to damage the next color. So as long as you're going upward with darkness, it's going to save you a lot of time from going to the sink and cleaning out your brush and getting fresh water. So I know that this light yellow is not going to wreck my next color, and the next color would be orange, and I do want to have orange. I'm going to do orange on my last building. So again, I'll just spin. I like to go 10 times. I really like to load my brush up with a lot of color. The more water, the lighter the color. The less water, the darker the color is going to be. So if you notice that your color is darker on one side and not the other, instead of getting more water, you could go ahead and do a few spins and take more. So I've done yellow, I did orange. Again, if you didn't do yellow, then you'll start with orange. If you're not using orange, then you can move on to red. But again, this is going to keep your water container a lot cleaner and your paints and your kit a lot cleaner. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse this off, spinning it gently on the bottom of my cup. Again, 10 to 15 times. I know that these kits are a little odd because orange isn't very orange, it's more of a reddish orange, but the orange is next to the yellow. I'm going to move up to the next color, which is red, and I do want to do red. I'm going to do red on this building. So moving up, again, if you don't want to use red, then you should be moving on to purple. If you don't want to use purple, you should be moving on to green. If you don't want to do green, you could be moving on to blue, then brown, and hopefully nobody's painting their buildings black because there's a lot of black already with the outlines, and the sky could be black and your road could be black. So black is a good color for some things, but maybe not our buildings for this project. Okay, when you move on to the next building, same thing. I can rinse my brush out. I know my water is starting to get dirty, but it's okay because the next colors are going to be darker. So this color is not going to wreck any of those. If it really bothers you to have dark water and you're getting ready to move on into the cold colors, you can take this over, you can dump it out, you can clean out your brush, you can get fresh water. Again, doing that too many times is just going to make the project take a lot longer than if you just go from lightest to darkest. So the next color would be purple for this kit, but I'm not using purple. And then we can move to green, but I'm not going to use green. I'm going to use the darkest blue. So my last color is going to be blue. And you can see already right here that this is actually a perfect color because I did get some of my red on this last building and I want to be able to cover that mistake up. Blue is going to go over it and you'll never even notice that the red was there. Once you're done painting, you can go ahead, you can take your water back to the sink, you can just dump it out, rinse it quick, and it can go back to your color spot in between the sinks. Brush too, we don't need soap to clean out our brushes for watercolor paints. You can go ahead and just take the brush underneath the water and just massage it on your hand until you no longer see color coming out of the brush. Once your painting supplies are put away, you can go ahead and you can take your Middleground skyscrapers to the drying rack, and you can go ahead and start working on your background right away. Great job.